What's up, gamers, and welcome back to the GLC podcast. I'm your host, Riad, and I'm with our special guest.
Mr. Ramos.
And today we're going to be talking about the game Bendy and the Ink Machine. So basically, Bendy and the Ink Machine is a 2017 horror game based on a classic cartoon art style, where the first game in the series is based on the main character, Henry, going back to the old studio where he used to animate from a message his pal and the owner of the company, Joey Drew, sent him. Henry goes through the studio to solve puzzles and meet entities and creatures made out of ink from the ink machine that Joey made. The main antagonist is Bendy, who comes out of ink to try and kill Henry throughout his quest in the studio. The game is divided into 5 chapters, with Chapter 5 being the finale of the game, where you finally defeat Bendy, who transforms into a beast. You then meet Joey Drew in his apartment, where he sends you back into the studio, starting out in Chapter 1, thus making the first game in the Bendy series a never-ending loop. So obviously, we have Mr. Ramos as a special guest for today's episode, therefore he's going to be asking us some questions about the game.
So in terms of the gameplay, what would you say is the part of the game that really gives people the drive to play the game again? Or just in general playability?
It's probably the way how the game has some bosses that are actually pretty fun to fight. And they definitely give some uniqueness about the game, because for the early parts of the game it's usually just objectives, quests, and puzzles. But later on you get to see how fun and how intense the game becomes.
And the intensity of the puzzles, are they like, do you have to be constantly watching your back?
Yeah, you definitely have to watch your back, because there's many enemies or entities that will try to creep up behind you when you're trying to complete objectives.
So while you're completing the objective, do you have to pause the objective to look behind your back?
There are times throughout the game where you have to watch behind your back to make sure there aren't enemies creeping up behind you. But there are definitely some ways that you can counter them, such as different weapons that you can hit them and kill them with.
So does the game alert you? Like, are there any sounds that you hear, or maybe some jump scares in the game?
Yeah, there's definitely some jump scares in the game that can definitely surprise you if you don't see it coming. But if you play the game many, many times over, then you're not going to get as scared as, say, the first time you played it.
So there's a chance that with a jump scare, you would have to start the whole objective all over again.
Yeah, because you basically die if you get jump scared.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I didn't expect that. So now, to pass the level, is it just one objective, or is it like multiple?
There's multiple objectives, and you just progress around the game. Like, you have to open up this door, or, like, spin these wheels or cogs to basically progress throughout the studio.
And I'm guessing there's some type of timing involved as well.
Yeah.
Got it. And you mentioned weapons, right? So
Yeah.
the weapon that is used in the game is what?
There are different weapons that you can use throughout the game, such as an axe, a wrench, or even a Tommy gun if you complete a hidden objective.
Oh, wow. So which one is the most effective in terms of usability?
Well, all of them have their uniqueness. Definitely the axe is what you use mostly throughout the game, and it does quite some good damage.
Got it. Is the axe the first weapon that you encounter?
Yes, it is the first weapon you get in the game. You get the weapon after falling through basically what is a pit in Chapter 1, and now you're basically just inside of the studio, going to have to try to escape.
Can you ever break it or lose it, or is it taken away from you?
Yeah, definitely. When you hit a wooden board throughout the end of Chapter 1, the axe just breaks. But at the start of Chapter 2, you get back your axe, luckily enough.
So, wait, so you drop the axe. So in the time that you drop your axe, how do you defend yourself?
Well, essentially, the chapter just ends and you just wake up on a pentagram. And when you wake up, there's...
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's a way to wake up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then once you wake up, you just see your axe just magically there all of a sudden. And just start off Chapter 2 with your axe.
So the theme of the game overall, it sounds like there's a lot of cycles.
Yeah, 100%. Because after you complete Chapter 5, you realize that the game is actually a never-ending loop, because Joey Drew, the owner of the studio, he sent you back to where you started in Chapter 1.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's an ongoing cycle within the entire game, which is also a cycle.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. I like how they did that. They really like thought about the, I guess, the horror aspect of it.
Yeah.
It sounds like a reoccurring nightmare. Like, you know when you think that you wake up from a nightmare and then, or a dream, and then you wake up and you end up in another dream.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever happened to you before. It sounds very much like that.
Yeah. And there's other games in the series, like definitely the next few games, like the sequels. They talk about more of the lore aspect, about the cycle from the first game.
So, do you know anything about the lore? What do they mention?
They mention about how the cycle was created by Joey Drew. It's a whole fiasco with the next few games, but for the second game in the series, Benny and the Dark Revival, it talks about trying to break the cycle to set Henry free.
So, based on what you've seen and read, what would you say is the thing that breaks the cycle? What's the key?
They talk about how the end is just a term used to describe how anything is possible if you use the end by killing, say, Bendy, or just solving everything.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of factors in the game that really, whoever put the game together really thought about a lot of things. It's not just putting together like, here's a horror game. You have to look over your shoulder. You have to solve puzzles. But I like the concept. I like the animation. I like the theme. The black and white aspect of it and the 1930s cartoon feel that they did with the game. But definitely something that I think was very creative on their end, and they really were consistent with game production.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more better, unique games. Definitely horror games. It's one of the best ever, honestly.
And it was rated what? What was the rating for the game?
I think it was one of the top games, the top indie games of the year.
Oh, wow. Shout out to all indie games. I'm just saying, not to throw any shade on the mainstream games, but there's a lot of indie games that I feel like the creators like really thought about a lot of stuff, and of course that's why they're creators, right? They're very creative. So shout out to all indie games.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the GLC podcast with our special guest, Mr. Ramos. Do you think Bendy is a fun and unique horror game? And if so, is there any comparisons you can have with it?
Well, definitely reminds me of, like I said before, like the older cartoons. But the two games that I think about when I'm looking at the gameplay would be Cuphead and Five Nights at Freddy's. Definitely it feels like it's a mixture of both. Now, I'm not saying that they copied. I'm just saying I like how they took the main, like one of the favorite parts of any gamer from both games, and they kind of put it together and it created their own story.
Definitely, I think Cuphead, FNAF, and one other game I'd like to add on, Hello Neighbor. I definitely do think that those games took... I definitely think Bendy took inspiration from those games based on the horror aspect, and they pulled a nice twist on it with the 1930s style.
I definitely agree with that. You could definitely see the inspiration and influence on the game.
Yeah.